I will begin with a confession. For many years now, I've had a little issue with my hands, which basically means that I can't play for long periods of time, and I also have to avoid pieces that have too many stretches. For the most part, I can cope with this issue mainly because I don't perform publicly, so I can decide when and how long to practice and what to play. However, there are some pieces I would really like to play but have to avoid because of the stretches they have. The gorgeous Allemande in A minor from the Nouvelles Suites de Pièces de Clavecin by Jean-Philippe Rameau is one of those pieces I thought I would never be able to play again, at least not without what I felt would be too many compromises. However, during the lockdown back in April, there was one evening I couldn't get the piece out of my head, so I thought, well, why not try playing it? No one's listening, I can experiment all I want to, and leave out or modify whatever bothers my hand. Surprisingly, after using some different note distributions between the hands and not holding down a couple of bass notes for their full value, it actually worked much better than I had imagined, and by now I feel that I can even share it with you. Something that, to me at least, is readily apparent in this Allemande is how expressive it is. Gustav Leonhardt once remarked that we have gradually begun to see that Baroque music is, if anything, more expressive than Romantic music, but in detail rather than in large lines. And I think this Allemande provides an eloquent example of the distinction Leonhardt makes between Baroque and Romantic expression. With that in mind, let's explore what I consider to be the expressive high point of this piece. And before we start the exploration, I want to point out that Rameau achieves this high point not only through musical means, but also by exploiting the unique characteristics and capabilities of a harpsichord. Formally, the piece is in rounded binary form, which means that we have two main sections, which we can call A and B. But while the B section starts with new or new-ish material, a portion from the A section eventually reappears and concludes the piece. We also expect a harmonic trajectory starting in the tonic and moving to a new key by the end of the A section, then the B section beginning in this new key, and the reappearance of the material from the A section signaling a return to the tonic. When a piece is in a minor key, what we normally expect is that the new key will be either the relative major, in this case we would have C major since we are in A minor, or the dominant, which again in this case would be E major. In this Allemande, we do eventually get to the relative major, but actually what happens is that the A section concludes with E minor, so we are in the minor dominant. Then the B section starts in the major dominant, E major, and then during the course of the B section we eventually get to C major. But this is only very briefly, as soon afterwards material from the A section reappears and we're thus back to the home key of A minor. Now let me play the beginning of the piece, which will also include the material that will return in the B section. Now, this opening motive in its first appearance begins with a stepwise ascent, followed by a descending leap. When it reappears, it keeps rising, which creates a certain dynamic tension, and this is further amplified by Rameau writing the two voices so close to each other that the resonance of the harpsichord increases, and with that get a subtle dynamic crescendo. Let me demonstrate this, and before I demonstrate, let me explain that the noises you hear outside are the cicadas singing very, very happily because we're in the middle of a heat wave. So don't worry, when I actually perform the piece, I've made sure that they were not singing at that time, but I don't think I will be able to get through this introduction hoping that they will stop singing. So if you hear them every now and then, just these are wonderful, beautiful summer sounds. So at least I like them because I like summer. So let's get back now. As I mentioned, the second time we have this opening theme, instead of the ascent plus the descending leap, we keep going up. Let me start it from here. So we keep rising, and what is going to happen is that the upper line will continue its rise and it will culminate in a high A. So if I continue from right from where I left, this one right here. Now, what is happening here, you have to imagine that when I play this A, I'm only a sixth away from the top note, at least of my instrument. The highest note of my instrument is F. So what is happening here is that we're getting fairly close to the uppermost register of the harpsichord. And this, as usually happens with instruments when you start pushing them towards the end of their range, creates a certain intensity. So Rameau is definitely thinking here in terms of the harpsichord. And of course, as I said, the other thing is that this is the highest note that we have reached up to now. And it's actually going to be the highest note of the entire A section. So what Rameau is doing here is he's really highlighting this moment through musical means, but also through his use of the instrument. When this material returns in the B section, Rameau does something ingenious. It all starts exactly the same, but when we get to that high point, the melody soars even higher to a C. Let me show you what happens. I will start a little before the return of the A material. So. And now it's all the same. So this. Now, this C is even closer to the upper limit of the harpsichord's range, so now we're only a fourth away from the highest note F. And this push to almost as high as the instrument can go is definitely audible and creates a dynamic tension, not to mention that we get a different color in the harpsichord's uppermost range. If the initial appearance of this idea in the A section was its expressive high point, the return of this idea now becomes the expressive high point of the entire piece, with the high C becoming the highest note in the entire piece. And this is also the only time that we hear this high C. Finally, a comment about notes inégales. My approach in this particular piece is to play notes inégales in a very flexible way. This means that I don't follow a consistent pattern of long and short notes, or better said, my long notes and short notes are not equally long and short. And perhaps the effect could be described as less obviously inegal. My main reason for doing this is that I want each of the many expressive gestures in this piece to have its own rhythmic identity, rather than all of them being subsumed under the same long-short pattern. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the subject of notes inégales is a very complex one. Historical sources, while acknowledging that the practice of notes inégales was an indispensable element of the French performing style, never really set down specific rules on how and when to use it, saying that it is dependent on the context and ultimately on the performer's good taste. So what you will hear in this performance is my understanding of how to apply the concept of notes inégales in this particular piece. However, this is not to suggest that my approach is the correct one, or that there is such a thing as a single correct approach. I hope what I do is convincing, but I would also encourage you to listen to other performances as well, in order to become familiar with a variety of approaches out there. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performance.